अंतिम दिन की जो हमारे सत्र हैं उसमें जो पहला सत्र है हमारा, उसमें आप सभी का हार्दिक स्वागत अभिनंदन है। आज का ये हमारा पहला सत्र जो है वो फेमिनिज्म एंड लिटरेचर यानी नारीवाद और साहित्य, इसको लेकर ये चर्चा हम करेंगे। और ये बड़ी खुशी की बात है हमारे लिए और सौभाग्य की बात है, वी फील प्रिविलेज्ड आवरसेल्व्स कि इस फील्ड में बहुत ही बड़े स्तर पर, बहुत व्यापक स्तर पर काम करने वाली ऐसी साहित्यिक विभूतियाँ यहाँ हम सबके बीच इस पैनल में उपस्थित हैं, जिनकी बातों को सुनने का मौका हम सबको मिलेगा। दरअसल आज़ादी के बाद जो परिदृश्य रहा है साहित्य का, उसमें बड़ी संख्या में, और बड़ी खुशी होती है इस बात को देखकर, बड़ी संख्या में महिला लेखकों का पदार्पण होता है। और उसकी वजह से साहित्य के क्षेत्र में जो परिदृश्य बदलता है, परिवेश बदलता है, वो तो अपने आप में महत्वपूर्ण है ही, लेकिन उसके साथ साथ उसका व्यापक असर समाज पर भी पड़ता है, संस्कृति पर पड़ता है। तो इस रूप में बहुत बड़ा एक कंट्रीब्यूशन जो है हमारी महिला लेखकों का रहा है, और उस नज़रिए से, जो अपने नज़रिए से चीज़ों को वो आप अपनी कलम के माध्यम से रखती हैं। तो इसके बहुत सारे पहलू हैं जिनको सुनने का मौका जिस पर हमें मिलेगा। हमारे लिए बड़ी खुशी की बात है कि आज के इस सत्र में हम सबके बीच नमिता गोखले जी, जो कि इस सेशन को चेयर कर रही हैं। तालियां आप सबकी तरफ से एक बार बज जानी चाहिए सभी के लिए। लेट्स वेलकम ऑल द पैनलिस्ट हियर। नमिता गोखले जी, डॉक्टर श्री मृणालिनी जी, शी इज़ विद अस। लीना चंदोरकर जी पुणे से पधारी हैं हम सबके बीच। प्रीति शेनॉय एंड सोनोरा झा, इन सब की उपस्थिति यहाँ हम सबके बीच में है। इन सब का स्वागत, और विधिवत साहित्य अकादमी की तरफ से स्वागत करने के लिए, अंगवस्त्र भेंट करने के लिए मैं निवेदन करूँगा हमारे अध्यक्ष माधव कौशिक जी से कि वो आए। और हमारे इस सेशन की चेयर नमिता गोखले जी, और हमारे सभी जो पैनलिस्ट हैं, विद्वान लेखक हैं, उन सब का अभिनंदन, उन सब का स्वागत करें। प्रीति शेनॉय, सोनोरा झा, लीना चंदोरकर जी, और डॉक्टर सी मृणालिनी जी। बातचीत के सिलसिले में बहुत सारे जो परिचय के कुछ बिंदु हैं आपके सामने आते रहेंगे, लेकिन मेरा दायित्व है और मैं आरंभ में संक्षिप्त परिचय चेयर की अनुमति से मैं सबका करवा देता हूं। नमिता जी, इजाज़त है। संक्षिप्त में बाकी चर्चाएं तो होंगी, लेकिन सबसे पहले बड़ी खुशी की बात है कि नमिता गोखले जी इस सेशन को चेयर कर रही हैं। आप साहित्य अकादमी पुरस्कार से सम्मानित विभूति हैं, लेखक हैं, और जो आपने कुछ बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट पुस्तकें लिखी हैं, द ब्लाइंड मैट्रियार्क, बिट्रेड बाय होप, and Jaipur Generals, a fictional reading of the Jaipur Literature Festival. She is author of 20 books. आप जयपुर लिटरेचर फेस्टिवल की को-फाउंडर और को-डायरेक्टर भी हैं। आपको असम साहित्य सभा का पुरस्कार भी मिल चुका है, इंक्लूडिंग सेवरल अदर अवार्ड्स। थैंक यू वेरी मच फॉर ज्वाइनिंग अस एंड चेयरिंग द सेशन। हमारे बीच इस सेशन में डॉक्टर सी मृणालिनी जी हैं, जो मंच पर विराजमान हैं। डॉक्टर सी मृणालिनी जी एज एमिनेंट तेलुगु राइटर, she is a retired professor in Telugu fiction, criticism, feminist, and translation studies. She has written 25 books, including short stories, literary criticisms, translations, and biography. R.K. नारायण का मालगुडी डेज, मिर्ज़ा गालिब की जीवनी और गुलजार की कहानियों का तेलुगु भाषा में आपने ट्रांसलेशन भी किया, जिससे बहुत प्रशंसा भी मिली है। Some of her noted publications are Telugu Pramukhula Chamatkara Bhashanalu, कोमली गंधारम प्रतिध्वनि एंड निशब्द विप्लावलु। आपको वेदगिरी पूर्णचंद्र राव पुरस्कार, श्रेष्ठ महिला लेखक के लिए वासिरेड्डी रंगनायकम्मा एंडोमेंट पुरस्कार, यद्यनापुडी पुरस्कार और कवित्रय पुरस्कार प्राप्त हो चुके हैं। बहुत सारे सम्मान मिले हैं। एंड एट प्रेजेंट शी इज़ वर्किंग एज अ चेयर तेलुगु डिपार्टमेंट इन सिलिकॉन आंध्रा यूनिवर्सिटी, कैलिफोर्निया, यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स। बहुत बहुत स्वागत है डॉक्टर सी मृणालिनी जी आपका। Leena Chandorkar ji from Pune, author of non-fiction book I, Me, Myself, a study of 6 women's autobiographies. She has written 2 novels also, Bends and Turns and Gulmohar Lane. पत्र पत्रिकाओं में भी आपके बहुत सारे आर्टिकल्स और ट्रांसलेशन जो है वो नियमित रूप से प्रकाशित होते रहते हैं। She is an associate professor and head of the Department of English at Garware College, Pune University. We welcome you, Leena ji. The next in the panel is Preeti Shenoy. Preeti Shenoy is an eminent English writer and motivational speaker also. Her writings are mostly about mental health, gender inequality, socio-economic class divide, relationship dynamics and challenges faced by the young adults. इसके अलावा आपकी बहुत सारी कहानी और कविता संग्रह भी प्रकाशित हुए हैं. आपकी रचनाएं जो हैं वो BBC, वर्ल्ड, कॉस्मोपॉलिटन, हिंदू कई अखबारों में और इस तरह के प्लेटफॉर्म्स पर पाठकों तक पहुंचती रही हैं. आपको पॉपुलर चॉइस फिक्शन अवार्ड 2021, इंडियन ऑफ द ईयर अवार्ड 2017 और बिजनेस एक्सीलेंस अवार्ड भी प्राप्त हो चुके हैं. और फोर्ब्स में भारत के सबसे प्रभावशाली व्यक्तियों की जो सूची है उसमें भी आपका नाम शामिल है. So we welcome Preeti Shenoy in this session. We have with us Sonora Jha. Sonora is the author of the novel The Laughter and Foreign. She has written a memoir also, How to Raise a Feminist Son, a memoir and manifesto. आप सिंगापुर में द टाइम्स ऑफ इंडिया और ईस्ट मैगजीन के लिए पत्रकारिता करती रही हैं. बाद में पॉलिटिकल कम्युनिकेशन विषय में PhD के लिए आप अमेरिका चली गई. शी इज़ now a professor of journalism and associate dean at Seattle University. Thank you and we welcome Sonora जी. आपका बहुत बहुत स्वागत है. और ये सभी पैनलिस्ट आपके सामने है. एक बार पूरी ऊर्जा के साथ आपकी करतल ध्वनि ज़रूर होनी चाहिए ताकि उस ऊर्जा का स्पंदन यहाँ से भी आप तक पहुँचे. नमिता जी से मैं रिक्वेस्ट करूँगा कि सेशन को चेयर करते हुए नाउ शी गोइंग टू इनिशिएट दिस सेशन विद हर ओपनिंग रिमार्क्स.
थैंक यू एवरीबॉडी. आप लोग यहाँ सवेरे पहुँच गए सवेरे के सत्र में और हमारी बात सुनेंगे. मुझे इट्स अ वेरी इम्पोर्टेंट थीम, फेमिनिज्म एंड लिटरेचर. मगर ये जो सब्जेक्ट है, जब तक हमारे से यहाँ पैनल में कम से कम एक पुरुष नहीं हो वो इनकम्प्लीट है, मुझे लगता है. हिम्मत हम दिला देंगे. तो आई एम डिलाइटेड टू बी हियर. माय ओल्ड फ्रेंड श्री मृणालिनी and Leena ji, who I'm meeting for the first time, Preeti Shenoy, well known to me. Also Sonora, at last I've met. तो मैं अंग्रेज़ी हिंदी दोनों में बोलूँगी. तो मुझे कल ही बताया गया कि इसको चेयर करना है, वो भी कल 10 बजे रात को. तो मैंने अपना तो थोड़ा बहुत प्रिपेयर किया था. अभी भूटान लिटरेचर फेस्टिवल से मैं लौटी हूँ, तो मैं इसको स्पॉन्टेनियस रखूँगी एकदम. तो और आप लोगों से भी we'll try to finish in time. तो questions from the audience भी, आप सबके अलग अलग व्यूज़ होंगे, सवाल होंगे, सब कुछ होगा, तो वो सब रखेंगे आपके सामने. मैं सोच रही थी कि each of us could begin with your presentations. मतलब क्योंकि पहले मैं कह रही थी please introduce yourself, but introduction तो हो चुके हैं. तो सब लोग एक एक छोटा सा presentation करके, फिर मेरे पास भी 5-6 सवाल हैं और इनके पास, आप हम सब एक दूसरे से सवाल पूछ सकते हैं और फिर ऑडियंस से सवाल लेंगे. तो इफ़ यू डोंट माइंड, पहले मैं अपना प्रेजेंटेशन अगर कर लूँ, फिर क्या होगा, देन आई कैन स्विच ऑफ बिकॉज आई एम अ बिट ऑफ अ नर्वस स्पीकर. तो एक बार मैं लिख के लाई हूँ सारा, मैं आपको पढ़ के बता दूँगी सारा. 6-6.5 मिनट में आपको मेरे संक्षिप्त में व्यूज़ मिल जाएंगे और फिर हम आराम से मैं औरों के सुन सकती हूँ और क्वेश्चंस को. तो पहले तो मैं ये कहना चाहती हूँ कि मैं ये जो कागज़ में कल आज सवेरे थोड़ा लिखा, तो हमारे जयपुर लिटरेचर फेस्टिवल में ग्लोरिया स्टैनम भी आई थी. क्या पता यहाँ भी हम कभी उनको बुला पाएँ, क्योंकि अभी उनकी उम्र ऐसी है कि वो ट्रैवल कर लेती हैं थोड़ा बहुत और हिंदुस्तान से उन्हें बहुत प्रेम है. तो उन्होंने कहा था कि a feminist is anyone who recognizes the equality and full humanity of men and women, yeah, women and men, and I would say that of all the genders in between also, क्योंकि उन्होंने अपने समय में कहा था. पर इस वक्त इतने सारे gender differentiations हैं. I am too glad to see so many people from different orientations in the audience, क्योंकि अब खाली वो man woman binary तो रहा नहीं है ना. अब तो सब अपना feminism, अपना मैस्कुलिनिटी संभालते हैं, पहचानते हैं. जो एक अर्धनारीश्वर का कॉन्सेप्ट था वो जेंडर फ्लूइडिटी में आ चुका है. तो मैंने, ये बड़ा मुश्किल सब्जेक्ट है, तो मैंने 3 लेखकों के बारे में थोड़ा सा लिखा है और उसी से मैं अपने व्यूज़ क्लियर करूँगी. सो इतनी फेमिनिस्ट मेरे बगल में बैठी हैं, सब तरफ से फेमिनिस्ट बैठे हैं, तो मैं हिम्मत से कहूँगी, I want to make it clear at the very outset, I am not a textbook feminist. First wave, second wave, third wave, no. By the dictionary definition of the word, and not comfortable with any ism. Feminism नहीं, कोई भी ism में मैं विश्वास करती ही नहीं हूँ. A feminist, according to the Cambridge Dictionary, is a person who believes in feminism, tries to achieve change that helps women get equal opportunities and treatment. While I believe in this, it is not my driving passion, because I care deeply for equal opportunities for men and women and those who identify as any other gender. If a feminist is a person who believes in feminism, then let us try to define feminism. It is, in my understanding, a range of socio-political movements that aim to establish political, economic, personal, social equality of the sexes. And feminists believe that societies prioritize the male point of view and that women are treated unjustly in these societies. So this is basically true, but it ignores the further intersections, especially in India and also in America, everywhere. First, before you say men and women is, of course, a little biased, more than a little biased. But you have to think of class, caste, economic opportunity, access to education, and cultural interpretations. We have to nuance that, in my view. In all that I do, I try to look at those things also. उसमें बहस भी हो सकती है बाद में, if anybody wants. तो मैं नारीवाद की बात नहीं कर रही हूँ, मैं स्त्री शक्ति से भी आगे बढ़ के श्री शक्ति की बात करना चाहती हूँ. ये एक साहित्य उत्सव है और मैं कुछ ऐसे साहित्य की बात करना चाहती हूँ जो आदि शक्ति या सेक्रेड फेमिनिन की बात करते हैं. तो एक विमेन ऋषिकाज इन द वेदास, ये एक स्वामिनी आत्मप्रज्ञानंद हैं, ये भुवनेश्वर में रहती हैं. तो इनका मैंने ट्विटर में देखा, ये सॉफ्टवेयर में थी दुबई में, फिर वो सब छोड़ के वो पहुंच गई. आइए राव साहब. तो ये हमारी जो स्वामिनी आत्मप्रज्ञानंद हैं, ये पहुंची जयपुर, ट्विटर में मिली, ट्विटर से उनको बुलाया, एंड उन्होंने बहुत ही खूबसूरत किताब लिखी है ऑन द विमेन ऋषिकाज इन द वेदास who have written about, they were poets of the Vedas. तो उन्होंने ये जो लिखा है कि, I'm quoting her, the Vedic mantras are the records of the spiritual realizations and experiences of the rishis who had revelations and hearings. Hearings मतलब revelations, जैसे कि उनको स्मृति जो भी. They are called seers or mantra drashtaraha, because they actually see the actions of the cosmic powers. A rishi is a person, a man or a woman of contemplation. She were not necessarily scholars or intellectuals, but had access to intuition, inspiration, and other superior modes of knowledge. Women of the Vedic period, which may be 4500 to 2500 BCE, were epitomes of spiritual attainments. The Vedas have volumes to say about these women. The gender discrimination, according to her, is a later phenomenon. Slowly, general opinion was formed that women were not adhikaris for the study of the Vedas. Such an injunction is not available anywhere in the Vedas. Many non-Vedic as well as Vedic scholars, so these were the first feminist writers in India. Many non-Vedic as well as Vedic scholars may not know that there are at least 27 rishikas or mantra drashtarahas in the Rig Veda. Of the 400 rishis of the Rig Veda Samhita, we can identify women rishikas such as Vagambrini, Surya Savitri, Ghosh, Kakshawati, मैं गलत अंग्रेजी से पढ़ रही हूँ, Aditi Dakshayani, अपला अत्रे एंड अदर्स. तो बहुत थे इसमें, एक दो तो उस वक्त ऋषि की, एक दो ऋषि थे, उनकी मतलब पत्नियां थीं, क्योंकि उनको भी It's not that it was nepotism कि अपनी wife को उन्होंने पढ़ा के वो कर. It's because they had access. क्योंकि घर में पढ़ाई लिखाई होती थी तो वो भी ज़रा संस्कृत जानती थी, लिखना पढ़ना जानती थी, वो opportunity उनको मिली. तो जहाँ तो this is my first feminist reading from India. फिर द सेकेंड रीडिंग मैं 3 लेखकों की बात करने वाली हूँ. पहले तो मैंने वेदिका जो ऋषिका हैं उनकी बात की. अब है सैफो, क्योंकि सैफो जो है वो शी इज़ वन ऑफ माय फेवरेट पोइट्स इन द वर्ल्ड. शी इज़ अ वेरी डिफरेंट स्पिरिचुअल एंड लिटरेरी लैंडस्केप, completely the opposite maybe, but in a way the same. Sappho was an archaic Greek poet from the island of Lesbos. In fact जो लेस्बियन नाम है उन्हीं से आया है, लेस्बोस में. और वो लिखती थी 570 BC. और her homoerotic lyric poetry was written to be sung while accompanied by music, usually the lute. तो बजा के उनके अभी भी गाने जो हैं वो अभी हम समझ नहीं सकते हैं क्योंकि वो पुरानी ग्रीक में है. और मैं इन्हीं के थ्रू इतना उनको मैं नेट में किताबों में पढ़ा तो मैंने कहा ये, क्योंकि द राइटर हु सर्वाइव सो लॉन्ग, अभी भी दुनिया भर में, जापान में भी कहीं भी लेखक लेखिका हैं जो उनसे इंस्पायर्ड रही हैं. इन एंशिएंट टाइम्स सैफो वाज एड्रेस्ड एज द पोएटेस एंड कंसिडर्ड द 10th म्यूज. She created that fluid sapphic stanza. तो जैसे हमारे छंद होते हैं वैसे उनका अपना जो छंद था वो था sapphic stanza. और वो she was listed among the 9 lyric poets. मतलब अपने समय का उनको साहित्य अकेडमी अवार्ड इन 200 मिल गया था. She was shown on coins and sculptures. आप समझिए कि उस वक्त के जो coins थे उनमें भी उनका प्रोफाइल आती थी. Or sculptures, statues and paintings. And even today, sapphic poetry is a genre in currency. क्योंकि लिखते हैं तो अभी भी blurb में a sapphic poem, वो चाहे उन्होंने 2 साल पहले लिखी हो. It is remarkable that this reputation survives undiminished even today. For Sappho remains contemporary inspiration for readers and lovers of literature of this generation and will remain so for future generations. This in spite of the fact that most of Sappho's poetry was lost over centuries, and there are just some surviving fragments. Or just Sappho was prolific as she was brilliant, and is said to have composed around 10,000 lines. These comprise love poetry as well as invocations and personal poems. Her well-known Ode to Aphrodite is one of my most beloved poems, even though I've read it only in translation. And I've heard it on the YouTube. यही चमत्कार है आज के कि हम सैफो जो तब रहती थी उनको आज सुन के समझ सकते हैं, हिम्मत ले सकते हैं उनसे. एक उनकी जो एक कविता है, पूरी कविता मेरे पास यहाँ नहीं है, but this is the poem that I love. ये है, it is begins, iridescent throned Aphrodite, deathless child of Venus, wild weaver, or so on. Sappho brings alive the very essence of womanhood and continues to represent it through centuries in her poetry. She lived on her own terms. She wrote on her own terms. ये मेरे लिए उनकी खूबियत है. She invokes feminine divinity through her sensuousness and her instinctive verse. But she is a master, क्योंकि लेखक होने में यही थोड़ी है कि आपकी फीलिंग्स हो, आपका क्राफ्ट होना चाहिए. अगर क्राफ्ट नहीं हो तो आपकी फीलिंग्स अपने पास ही रखिए, क्योंकि they are not fit to be shared. She is a master of craft, of technique and meter. I speak of her in the present tense because she is timeless, as true as art always is timeless. अब तीसरी किताब जो है जिसकी मैं आपसे बात करूंगी, किताब मतलब लेखिका, ये है रुकाया हुसैन और इनकी किताब थी लेडीलैंड. So let us move to another century, another time and place. Ruqayya Sakhawat Hussain, better known as Begum Ruqayya, was born on 9 December 1880 in Rangpur district, now in Bangladesh. मतलब मैं डेट ये दिखा रही हूँ कि अभी, just less recently. Now, and died recently compared to the other 2 names. बहुत पुराने थे वो तो. She was born in Bangladesh and died in 1932 in Calcutta, which was still one country. Her long story, Sultana's Dream, was written in 1905 and published in the Madras-based English periodical, the Indian Ladies magazine. तो ये यूटोपियन feminist novella है, और ये है, it is set in something called Ladyland. And the parda system has been reversed. खुद वो पर्दे में she was brought up to a well-off family. And it is men who live in parda. They live in seclusion, while women rule the world. It is a prescient book. मतलब बहुत, it looked like it was, she had seen what was going to happen in the world. Except women still don't rule the world. It is still men who rule the world. But there were many changes in our planet that she said about, you know, many technology things she could think of कि ऐसा होगा, ऐसे बदलेगा. So Ladyland will someday come when feminine instincts and values will assert themselves and are valued somewhere. क्योंकि सत्ता में, इन चीज़ों में feminine जो है, जो हम respect करते हैं, वो उसको जगह नहीं मिलती है. Women have always had voice and vision. ओहो, मैंने इतना टाइम ले लिया कदम. तो मैं हमारी Dr. Malashri Lal and I have written 3 books on Sita, Radha. अभी हम लक्ष्मी पे लिख रहे हैं. तो यही मेरे लिए, these are the important things. Reinterpreting for today. I'm really sorry I went overboard with... we have time. Which of you would like to? We can either go 1, 2, 3, 4, or whichever of you is feeling ready. कार्ड तो मुझे मिला ही नहीं है मुझे. Thank you, sir. Okay, this is the order. Mrinalini ji.
Good morning, everyone. It's not everybody's ideal way of starting a day with feminism. So I'll try to make it as palatable. We all will try to make it as palatable as possible for all of you. So thanks a lot for this really good crowd. And she has already come to 19th century, I'm glad. I want to come directly to 20th century, but Namita at least gave me hope that I can quote one dialogue from a British novel, and then come to Telugu, come to theory of feminism, and come to my own language, literature. So I would like to start. Actually, we are doing Azadi Ki Mahotsav, no? So I want to, specifically talk about what freedom means to these feminist writers, how they have defined freedom for themselves, because this is the mahol for freedom. So I just recall that in Jane Eyre, Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre, I am no bird and no net ensnares me. I am a free human being with an independent will. Jane Eyre either says this to Rochester or she thinks about it when she's about to marry him or something. So it was written in 1847. And we got our independence in 1947. See, 100 years before a country got its independence, we have a woman, of course, a European woman, expressing herself in 2 words. One, free, and another one is human being. She's not calling herself a woman. She's calling herself an individual, a human being. And then she's also mentioning an independent will. So the struggle for being free, for having an independent, for being allowed to have an independent will, is something that started long before a country like India got its independence. So obviously in India, the feminist theory or feminist thinking or feminist writings would come much later, because we have to deal with the country's independence first of all, and then you can talk about the freedom of the individual. So that's how it progressed from 1947. So I thought it was a coincidence that exactly 100 years before Jane Eyre said that. So once we come here, I just want to ask one question. Is it different? Is women writing different from feminist writing? Is there a difference? When we're talking about something like freedom, what is the freedom we are talking about? And then, is all women writing feminist writing? Or is there any palpable difference between these 2 writings? Because when I come to my language, from 15th century, we had our first woman poet in the 15th century, Talapaka Timmakka. And from here, she was a women writer, but not a feminist writer. So up to 1960s, 70s, I would call the writers were women writers. Women told extremely good tales. They wrote very good poetry. they wrote plays, they wrote short stories, everything was there. But what's the difference? When do they become feminists? At what point of time would we call them feminist writers instead of generally calling them women writers? So I think what happens in women writing is simply telling a story very well. Just telling a story. They do it very well. So they can spin a story and they did it very perfectly, practically perfectly. But in feminist writing, they are actually trying to find themselves. They are not just spinning a tale. They are discovering themselves. They are trying to identify their frustrations, their happiness, their desires, and every predicament they have. They are trying to find themselves through their own writings. So that is the way it's a conflicting writing. Feminist writing is not simple writing. It has plenty of conflict in it. So then we become feminist writers. We may all be writing, but as we all know, in fact, I know a few writers who are feminists in their writing, but they don't like to be called feminists. I had this argument with Mridula Garg, famous eminent Hindi fiction writer. When I met her, she keeps telling me, Mrinalini, I'm no feminist. Don't call me feminist. I said, okay, ma'am, it's your will and wish what you want to be called. So, but her writings are bordering on feminism. Anyway, so that's a different matter altogether. So what we're talking about is women started trying to understand their own selves while they are writing this fiction or poetry. So that is when we call it a movement, feminist movement. And as we can see, Indian English writing, and some of them would be speaking about Indian English women writers. So from Toru Dutt to Chitra Divakarani, you may talk about everyone. But their writings were not a movement. They were sporadic. Kamala Das has written Kamala Markandeya. We have all of them there. But that's different. But I think feminist movement in literature started only in regional languages. It did not start in pan-Indian English writing. We started only in regional languages. All of us here, you're from Karnataka, Tamil, Oriya, Gujarati, anywhere, Marathi. We have feminist movement only in the regional languages and not in English. So these movements started only after late 1970s and 80s. So what is the freedom we are talking about? Why do they want freedom? What is the particular freedom which has been, I'm only confining myself to the literature. In life, of course, there are a lot of freedoms to talk about. I'm confining myself to the literary works. And here we can say that freedom from stereotyping. That was one of the basic ingredients for feminist literature. You are a mother, a daughter, a wife, a mother-in-law, a sister-in-law. You are in all roles. You are always referred to in your particular role. You are seldom called an individual. This is where feminist studies start. This is where Indian feminist writing started. They wanted to be known as human beings. That's why I quoted Jane Eyre. They wanted to be known as human beings. They wanted to be known as individuals and not just as women in a particular role, whichever role she is donning at that particular moment. So that's not what feminism meant for feminist writers here. So they started with attacking the stereotypes. And in this stereotype, the body writing started. Because first of all, I need control of my body. That is the basic thing I think everybody knows about writing of the body in Indian literature, in English literature, anywhere. So they started with, I need to have control over my body. That is one basic freedom. Whether I want to marry, whether I want to have sexual relations, whether I want to have a child, I don't want to have a child, with whom should I live, all these things are my choice. They should be my choice, as Namita was saying earlier. It's about choice. I should have the choice. That is the freedom we need. Second type of freedom we need, what do we need is that, second type is that have the will. They have the right to make a decision. Decision making is something that women seldom have in their households or even outside. So they wanted to have this particular decision making will because they know that they're capable of it. So body writing in Telugu, I would say Olga did it perfectly. Our most popular Telugu feminist writer. She writes about all the parts of a woman's body, and each part has a different story. She writes about the hair, about the nose, about the mouth, about the eyes, and up to the uterus. She writes about all different parts of women's anatomy, how they are controlled by the patriarchal society. Each one has a different story. So in body writing, it's not just about having freedom. It's about having some respect towards the body. Women demand respect towards their body, not just showcasing them for beauty. So here I do know that feminists have come into conflict with other people who consider themselves feminists, because we used to have, in our group, when we used to talk to some young girls, they would say, what's wrong in going to beauty pageants? You said we need to have control over my body. I have control over my body, so I want to go for a beauty pageant. I want to show off my body. That's also control, right? Yeah, theoretically they're right. But how do we convince them that your body has become a commodity once you enter a beauty pageant? It's market-driven. Any beauty pageant, anything is market-driven. So this is the theory we try to argue with them about when we are talking about it's our body, we want to show it off, we want to be in fashion parades, we want to be in beauty contests, right? They do have that right. So these sort of conflicts are always there in feminist writings or whenever feminists are accosted by other people. So, right, having freedom from stereotyping is the first one. The second one would be, should I be at home? Having freedom at home, slowly, gradually, they were given some freedom at home. They could take some decisions. They were allowed to talk. At least freedom of speech was there, slowly from 70s, 80s, maybe. That was also projected in this fiction. But when I want to become a citizen, I am not just a woman. I am not just a mother, father, that all the roles I've talked about. And even decision making regarding them is also good enough. But if I want to become a citizen, if I want to go out, should my family be my priority? Or if I want to be a citizen contributing to the welfare of the society, country, either as a, could be a politician, could be a workforce, could be an NGO, whatever, in whichever way. If I give priority to that as a citizen of the country and not just a woman or a household family member, is that possible? So this is also something that Olga, Satyavati, Nirmala, all these people talked about these things also. And in the third level, because I have very little time, I can't elaborate on all that. And the third thing was, women suddenly realized that workers of the world unite is very easy for a Marxist slogan. But you can't say women of the world unite. Women have many other deeper structures. There is caste, there is class, there is religion. All these enter. If a woman belongs to a scheduled caste or she belongs to a minority community, her torture is doubled. Both gender enters into it, caste enters into it, religion enters into it. Like Manasa Endluri, she is a SC Christian. She says, my religion, my caste, and my gender, all three are stopping me from going forward. So there are many nuances to feminism. You can't say that all the women have the same problems. There is not there. There are different various types of things which we have to address. So all these were addressed in Indian literature. That's the best thing about it. Especially in Telugu literature, I can see that though it started with mainstream women fighting against patriarchal institutions, it's ended with, even among the women, they are very particular about what their particular needs are. So all this was reflected in the poetry, in the short story of that. And now globalization has made women realize that they are not the only one who are suffering. Men are suffering equally. In fact, it's actually because nobody has freedom. Everybody is a consumer now. Hardly anybody is an individual, hardly anybody is a person. Everybody is a consumer. So nobody has any freedom now. And I think I will end with one thing. Men actually should be fighting against patriarchy more than women, if you ask me. You see, you can't cry. Where are the men here? Yeah. You can't cry. If you cry, you said, "Ek ladki jaisa ye kyun ro rahe hai?" Why can't a man cry? Let him be sensitive, let him cry. And he can't be afraid. So you send even a 5-year-old boy with a 15-year-old sister, male, no? So he'll be protecting her in the road. But you won't send a 15-year-old girl alone. Even a 5-year-old brother is okay. But poor fellow, he's scared. Men are allowed to be scared. Men are allowed to cry. Men are also allowed to feel bad and think that they have lost their freedom. So I think men should fight against patriarchy more than women. I welcome that from men altogether. And this has also been broached upon. And with one more last thing, what happened in Telugu literature, I'll tell you one thing. What has feminism done to literature? Yeah, no, yeah, it's done. What has feminism done to literature on the whole? I just mentioned what are the issues that were tackled in literature and what has feminism contributed to literature as a whole. I can see that men are writing more cautiously. they're very, very scared that they can't say a single thing against women in their writings. They're very cautious. In Telugu, we have a saying, "Oldu daggara pettukoni rastaru," is what we define this as. That's what men are doing now. They're writing very cautiously. Second thing is they're very cautious in the language they use. The male writers have changed their language. Earlier, anything and everything could be said when you're depicting or portraying or describing a woman or a situation. But now, men are no longer like that. They are very cautious. They are self-conscious. They know that they are going to anger a woman if they use the wrong word. So, feminism has affected men already. It has affected, obviously for a positive result. So, we are very glad that male writers in Telugu are changing, have changed a lot. Now they take care. In fact, my own colleague is a very good poet in Telugu. When he wrote a poem, he came to me, he showed it to me and said, "Madam, just take a look. Is there any objectionable word for you? If there is, I'm going to change that word." So that is the ultimatum for me. So I thought it's very good. He keeps, yeah? No, I'm stopping here. So thanks a lot for your patient hearing. I just managed to.
And some arguments to pick up later. The baton is to you.
Oh, straight away? Okay. Thank you so much. That was a brilliant talk by Mrinalini ji. Thank you very much. And I will start without much ado. And I would first of all like to thank Sahitya Akademi for giving me this opportunity to present my thoughts. The topic for the panel discussion is feminism and literature. Within its broad ambit, it encompasses myriad areas of discussion. And that is why I'm going to keep a written script with me so that I don't exceed the time. Given the limitation of time, I will narrow down the focus on literature by women, and then further narrow it down to focus on the writings in English of a particular woman writer of Indian origin. The title of my paper is Feminist Politics and Feminine Sensibilities in Select Novels of Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni. Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni has been publishing novels, poetry, and short fiction since the 1980s. She is based in the US. Her writing straddles the line between feminist and diasporic literature, between popular and literary fiction, and between modern story plots and rereading of Indian mythology and history. Through it all, though, her focus has remained unflinchingly on giving voice to the women characters in her narratives. Divakaruni started her career as an academician, teaching English literature at the University Department of English. She continues to teach today, but at the Department of Creative Writing. She brings to her writing that self-awareness of a literary scholar. She has spoken about her shift from teaching English literature to her present focus on creative writing. In an interview with Neela Seshachari, professor of English at Weber State University, Divakaruni talks about her entry into a career devoted to creative writing. And I quote, "At a certain point, when I was getting my PhD at Berkeley, my political consciousness was changing. I felt that my life as a woman of color living in America was so divorced from what I was intellectually spending my time on that a great dissatisfaction rose in me. I figured that I needed to write about what was of importance in my life, and one of the big things was the act of immigration and the way it had changed me. The way that this distance from India made me appreciate my own culture as well as question it." So this is, both ways. It cuts both ways. End quote. We find in the writings of Divakaruni, therefore, the interplay of two of the most important elements that have shaped her writing: feminism and diaspora. Women writers have a token presence in the literary canon and on university and college syllabi. Very often, women's writing is dismissed as chick lit. In the stories, hero means the man at the center of action, and heroine means the romantic love interest. Chitra Banerjee has resolutely challenged this by creating stories where women bond strongly. In this, she is countering a literary tradition which has historically privileged the romantic couple. The patriarchal tradition repeatedly reminds women that the first duty is towards the men in the family. In her novels, like Sister of My Heart and Mistress of Spices, Chitra Banerjee gives us women characters who give top priority to the women in their lives rather than the men. This is an unlikely display of female solidarity and sisterhood that is rarely highlighted in literature. The women in these novels are proud to be feminine and unafraid to show the nurturing, caring, and compassionate side. In this, Chitra Banerjee counters the second wave feminist thinking that encouraged women to be masculine internally and externally. Second wave feminism thought of the nurturing qualities as subservient qualities that held women back, since success in the workforce demanded ambition, ruthlessness, and focus on career goals. As Liesl King says in her excellent article, Woman to Woman, Sister to Sister, and I quote, "Femininity is not a negative term, which refers to weakness. Instead, perceived in its fullest sense, femininity refers to strength and empowerment through compassion, a truth which Chitra Banerjee demonstrates with wonderful grace and sensitivity through Sister of My Heart and Mistress of Spices." End quote. This is not in contradiction to Divakaruni's belief that in a culture that projects a good woman as self-sacrificing and the best silent support, it is no sin for her to prioritize her own desires, wants, and passions. Time and again, women in her novels find their best moments not in their familial roles, but in the achievements they stumbled upon serendipitously. In her novel, Before We Visit the Goddess, Sabitri, in a letter to her granddaughter, is describing her happiest moment. This is what she writes, and I quote, "But that moment in the car wasn't the happiest moment of my life, just like it hadn't been so on the starlit terrace with Rajiv. My happiest moment would come much later. I had opened Durga Sweets by then and had managed to turn it into a profitable shop. One day, in the kitchen at the back of the shop, I held in my hand a new recipe I had perfected. I took a bite of the corn-shaped dessert. Satisfaction overwhelmed me. This was something I had achieved by myself without having to depend on anyone. No one could take it away. That's what I want for you, my Tara. That's what it means to be a fortunate lamb." End quote. So autonomy and agency are therefore concepts that the female characters in Divakaruni's books demonstrate time and again. In three of her popular and well-researched novels, The Palace of Illusions, The Forest of Enchantment, and The Last Queen, Divakaruni maintains the authenticity of events, but at the same time gives her imagination the freedom to fill in the gaps that have been left unexplored by the standard historians. Divakaruni tries to lift the three women protagonists of these books. I'm finishing. So these three books, Draupadi in the Palace of Illusions, Sita in the Forest of Enchantment, and Rani Jindan in The Last Queen. She lifts up these women from the circle of victimhood and presents them as individuals capable of making difficult decisions. In the hands of Divakaruni, these women assert themselves against the patriarchal institutions and sexist attitudes of the times. Whether it is an acknowledgement of physical desire or a prioritization of duty over desire, Divakaruni gives us women characters who know what they want and how to get it. Rani Jindan in The Last Queen falls in love with her courtier, Lal Singh. She needs to convey it to three of her most trusted people, her brother, her bodyguard, and her maid. So she summons them. And I quote from the book. She says, "All my life I've been taught that it is shameful for women to talk of desire, but I force myself to be frank. I tell them, I value a love and loyalty more than my pride, so I will speak my mind. I have been a widow since I was 21. The years stretched ahead of me, empty as a desert. Then miraculously, I found love again. But I cannot marry Lal. If I do, I must give up being regent. I cannot abandon the leap like this. But should I be sentenced to loneliness just because I wish to protect my son? Many of the nobles have several wives and mistresses too. The liaisons are accepted. Am I a sinner just because I am a woman? End quote. Rani Jindal was the last wife of the powerful Maharaja Ranjit Singh of Punjab. After her widowhood and as the regent, she had to battle the mighty British Empire to keep Punjab safe. The British propaganda machine labeled her as the Messalina of the Punjab after a promiscuous Roman queen. In the received history of the times, it is the valor of the powerful Maharaja Ranjit Singh that comes down to us. The story of his last life is relegated to the margins, if told at all. Retelling his story as her story is important, as it foregrounds another reality which is completely eclipsed under the dominant narratives of male life stories of battles and martial prowess. Placing the woman at the center of the story and telling the events from her perspective is an agenda that Divakaruni follows even in the retelling of myths. Her two popular books, In the Forest of Enchantment and The Palace of Illusions, are retellings of the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, told from the point of view of Sita and Draupadi. This directly links with the reclaiming of a woman's agency. In keeping with the changing times, where mythology has become more receptive to different kinds of reinterpretations. Divakaruni makes her intention clear in the author's note to the Palace of Illusions. She says, it is Draupadi's life, her voice, her questions, and her vision that I invite you into in the Palace of Illusions. Retellings in the form of adaptations are not a new phenomena. In fact, in the golden days of Sanskrit classical drama, retellings of mythologies like that of Shakuntala by Kalidas were almost the norm. In this, he followed the conventions that sprang from existing dramaturgy like the Natya Shastra. Similarly, existing retellings are influenced by modern belief systems and social mores. This does not mean that female mythological characters need to be represented in the mold of modern Western feminism. Divakaruni's Draupadi in the Palace of Illusions works within the Indian framework, but with a very clear sense of self-awareness, establishing herself as the prime mover of her life story. Recent events bring into sharp focus how a woman's body continues to be the site for male control and domination. The disrobing of Draupadi in court in full view of her 5 husbands who watched helplessly parallels the inaction today of democratic institutions and state agencies. Draupadi's disrobing was in fact the most effective way of showcasing the emasculation of men she belonged to, and an attack on her body is the most effective attack on her men. Taking the analogy further, one can equate Krishna, her savior, to the higher courts of the land, who should appear when there is a cry for help, and whose presence should ensure that the women of this country cannot be grossly mistreated in this manner. Draupadi exists even today, not only in the Mahabharata, not only in Mahashweta Devi's powerful story, Draupadi, or in Divakaruni's The Palace of Illusions, but on the streets where violence erupts and a woman's body becomes the easiest target of attack. What do women want after they have told all their stories? Do we just want the freedom to tell our stories from our own perspective? Or do we want these stories to redefine and reshape society? No law guaranteeing gender equality will succeed in an unequal society. It was the path-breaking writings of authors like Charles Dickens, Thomas Hardy, and George Eliot that brought about far-reaching legislative changes in Victorian England. The same transformation is sought in India. As more women write stories, show the mirror up to people, and push for gender equality, we as a nation will move forward towards a more just and humane society. Thank you.
I want to thank you for that both of you. I just stopped and took it from her because I'm a very tough timekeeper. But you opened up one line of thought. Here she's opened up very thoughtful critique of a writer I've known and respected, but I never thought of her work in such detail. So thank you very much, both of you. And now we hand over to Preeti Shenoy, who brings popular reading to, again, a very thoughtful perspective on today's world. Please, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Namita. So honestly, when I saw them with all their papers, I was, oh my God, I haven't prepared. Because I was ready for a conversation, because usually panels have conversations. So as they were speaking, I was thinking about what is it that I can share. And I thought I would share my perspective, not about anyone's work, but from my own life. That's what I thought I would share. What has feminism meant to me as a writer? And how have I passed it on to my daughter? My daughter is 22 now. And a little bit about my background. I come from a very middle-class family. My grandfather really was, had fought poverty. And I'm the first woman in my family to have a postgraduate degree. And the postgraduate degree I got after having got married and after having 2 kids. So I went because it was very important to me, because I come from a community where girls are married off at a very young age. My cousins were all married by 18 and 19. And I was in Mumbai at that time, and I got married at 23, and they said, oh my God, she's so old, who will marry her? So that's the kind of thinking and the community that I was raised in. No woman has earned. And I always felt that earning brings a very big balance inequality in a relationship. If you earn, I feel it's so important for a woman to be financially independent, because, otherwise there is an inequality in the relationship. And as per World Labour Statistics, 89% of women in India do not have their own earnings. Okay, it's only 81%, sorry. It's only 19% who earn. And I do feel that brings a inequality. And I never realized it, but my books were feminist. But I never set out to write feminist books. And I don't even think of my books as feminist, because I just draw from the world, I draw from what I see, and I write a book. So my third book, it was Secret Wishlist, and I remember I was at a literature festival in Agra, and the session before me was Shobha De and Prahlad Kakkar, and Prahlad Kakkar says it like he sees it. So he was grilling Shobha De on stage, and I was very nervous because my next session was with Prahlad, so I said, oh, I don't know what he's going to ask me. I'm going to be finished. I was just 3 books old, and this was 11 years back. So I texted my husband. I said, I don't know what he's going to ask me. And then he came on. He had read my book, The Secret Wishlist, and he said, I couldn't stop reading. I read and read and read. And then he had one question for me. He says, Preeti, your women character in the book are so colorful. They're so strong. They're so brave. Why is that man so horrible, he said. So honestly, I was not experienced. What I had done is that the husband in that book is Sandeep, and the book it addresses issues like marital rape, okay, The Secret Wishlist. And it's about a young girl who gets married very early. She's caught kissing a boy when she's 16. She comes from a very conservative family. Again, I'd seen many incidents like this, and her parents marry her off. Cut forward 15 years later, she's trapped in a loveless marriage. And that's what the story is about. And her cousin, Vibha, is working. She's a working woman. And there's a third person who is Tanu, okay? And she's never got married. She is living the life. She's a modern woman. So 3 kinds of women which we see in India. That's what the story is about. So when Prahlad asked me this question, that's when I thought about it. And then I realized that I had taken all the bad qualities of every man I have come across and I've stuffed it into Sandeep. Okay, that's what I had done. And so I said, oh my God, okay, I didn't realize that. But surprisingly, after having read that book sold lakhs and lakhs of copies. It's still on the bestseller list. So many men wrote to me and they said, we didn't realize we are like Sandeep. So yeah, I was shocked. I was shocked. And there was a gentleman who doesn't read my kind of writing. He was working in Dubai. And he said, I just saw it in the airport. I saw an attractive cover. I picked it up. He says, by the time I landed in Dubai, I had finished the book. And he says, the book is about Diksha, the protagonist, making a wish list. So because Diksha has got married at such a young age, and, she comes across certain incidents happen in the book, and she doesn't even know what her desires are. Okay, so they ask, what are your desires? And she says, that's the first time I have thought about what my desires are. Because she's always thought of herself as a mother, as a wife, and she writes it down. So he was fascinated by it. And at the end of the book, there is a place where you can write your wish list. He says, I got married. We are like 18 years into the marriage. My wife is very happy. I have never thought of asking her what her wishes are. So he says, I went home. And he says, he wrote to me a very detailed email with their family picture and all that. He says, I went and asked my wife, what are your wishes? He says she was so moved, and she said that he always thought that he was a great husband and he was fulfilling all her wishes and they had a happy marriage, and he never thought of asking her what her desires are. She says, I want to wear a red gown like Julia Roberts in Pretty Woman. And he's saying, I didn't even know who is Julia Roberts. I didn't even know who is Pretty Woman. And I've lived with her for 18 years. He's saying that's the kind of things which your book made me think about, which I felt very happy about. And then there was another incident which I remember. I was invited by Penguin for the Jaipur Literature Festival party. Penguin has a party which goes on every year. So, and that time I was just one book old. Today I'm 15 books old. It's like 15 years back. So I said, okay, fine, I will go for this party. And, my daughter was very small at that time. And she asked me, and she's never seen me traveling alone. Okay, I've always traveled with family. Although before marriage, I used to go everywhere alone. So then my daughter asked me, Mama, who will protect you? Okay, so that shocked me. That shocked me. I said, what is this? I said, I have to set an example for my daughter. Because I'm raising someone, I want her to see me as a role model. I said, baby, we don't need protection. Because she says, in India, you hear of so many things. It's not safe for a girl. Yeah, it's not safe for a girl to travel, to travel alone. So she says, I said, we don't need any protection. That's fine. And then I would like to end with a letter I wrote to my daughter on her 18th birthday. My daughter left home when she was 16. She got into college when she was 16. In Singapore, I said, just go. No problem, you can manage on your own. I didn't even go to see and find her accommodation. She did it all on her own. And I was proud about that. She's 22 now. So this is a letter I wrote to my daughter on her 18th birthday. And I would like to read it. Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah, it's not long. So this was an open letter to all teens, and it was published, it was translated into Hindi, it was published by the Dainik Bhaskar. So this is what I have written. My darling daughter, on this day 18 years ago, I lay in the hospital utterly overwhelmed. I had gone into labor unexpectedly. My gynecologist had not yet reached the hospital. It was 5:30 a.m. in the morning. And you were in a tearing hurry to come out into the world. The doctor, who was on night duty, scurried about in panic and urgency. It was a natural childbirth. Are you qualified enough to handle the baby? I thundered at the doctor in throes of my labor pain. Yes, ma'am, she replied. When they told me I had a baby girl, I wept in joy. When you're hoping, wishing for something to happen so badly, it was an incredible and a magical moment when the wish is granted. But the nurses on that duty that night didn't know this. Don't worry, you can try for a boy next time, they said. They thought I was crying out of sadness. I already have a boy. I so badly wanted a girl. I yelled through my tears. So this, my daughter, was your welcome into the world where people presume girl children are not welcome. Somehow boys are superior. Do you know, my darling, that even to this day, an average of 2,332 female fetuses are aborted on a daily basis. Studies vary in this regard, but numbers are alarming even if you consider the possibilities in the lower range. One group estimates that 10 million female fetuses have been aborted since the 1990s. So that's the kind of things that a girl child in India today has to fight to be even given a chance. So you can imagine like what a huge thing it is if you manage to get a postgraduate degree in India, being a girl.
A big clap. You've been very proud of
Yeah,
all
absolutely.
the thing you put in. But we have to wind, because you have to wind up, and there's the next speaker still after you.
Yeah.
So I'm giving you half a minute to close.
Yeah, that's fine. So what I want to conclude, so you can in fact Google the letter to her daughter in 18th birthday, Preeti Shenoy. You can read the whole letter. So what I have told her is that be unstoppable. And this is my advice to every young girl in India. You are going to face obstacles. There are going to be very difficult things for you to handle. But there's just one word, unstoppable. And that invariably finds a way into my books. My book, The Rule Breaker, talks about this, about breaking all rules. And people are able to connect with my writing, for which I am really grateful. Thank you so much.
So, dear friends, that was Preeti Shenoy, who's unstoppable, and her advice is very good. Be unstoppable. My question is, do we say that to the men, or should we not? Not clear. So now, the last speaker for today is Sonora Joy Jha, and she is very, because she's a professor and has been taking notes throughout on everybody's conversations. And I found a deep thread between Mrunalini's and Leena's, and your personal thing, her thing on another writer, your thing on Telugu literature. Now I'm asking you to please give your thoughts, your views on the larger thing. Her famous book is How to Raise a Feminist Son. And that's her latest book. So please just do conclude so that we can have some questions to each other and the audience.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you so much. I'll start by thanking the Sahitya Academy for inviting me all the way from the US. I have to say it's very personal for me, because one of the things that that involves feminism and literature for me is the fact that I've lived a very feminist life, and that means making some very difficult choices, taking certain risks that then alienate you from, say, family. So I don't have a very strong relationship with my family because of my feminist choices. And the way I like to come to India is through my persona as a feminist, as an author, as an academic. And so when institutions like Sahitya Academy and other literary festivals invite people like us who have self-exiled ourselves so that we can live by our principles, that to me is feminism in literature. So thank you very much for that. And thank you for all these incredible comments. There's so many themes that intersect with the remarks I wanted to make. Similar to Preeti, I didn't know that we were going to speak, but I do have a few thoughts I wanted to share that sort of resonate with everyone else, what everyone else has said. You know, you talked about the history of feminist literature, and you did too. You know, I was definitely inspired growing up in India by feminist writers, just say Mahashweta Devi, Ismat Chugtai. Mahashweta Devi, all those years ago, was writing not just about, you know, Narivadi, which we say feminism. She was talking about caste and class, and, you know, like Hajar Shora Shirma, about her son, a naturalized son dying, and what it means for the mother. So through motherhood, exploring things, so many intersections of so many different kinds. And to me, you know, even Ismat Chugtai writing about women and desire, Kamala Das writing about desire, whatever the issues or the problems may have been with these writers as well, these intersections of writing about women's desire, women's agency, to me that was the feminist tradition of writing in India that I was inspired by, you know. So that's what I grew up with, and that drew me to journalism. And then the lived experience of women who would not know the word feminism or Narivadi, right? They're living their lives. I used to cover a lot of rural journalism across India, go to Orissa, meet someone like Sumani, who's fighting the World Bank so that this big project doesn't come and ruin her village. These women, they would not, you know, they don't have the access to resources to write literature, but they were writing their lives, they were writing their histories and creating a kind of India in which women like me with resources that have families, urban, educated, English speaking, could then flourish and return to write and collaborate with them on putting their stories out there. So So to me, that feminism, there are many feminisms we were talking about, and I've co-edited a volume. That's an academic book called New South Asian Feminisms, Disrupting the Discourse in Social Media, Film and Literature. So ये सब जो traditions हैं, so अभी जो आके social media भी हुआ है, there's so many things that are happening with feminism that has to be inclusive, not just of women, but masculinity. We talked a little bit about how we have to focus on what feminism means to men. So my book, How to Raise a Feminist Son, was drawn from that, because when my son was born, I had only I'd seen violent men in my family. And when I held this baby in my arms, I was alarmed. I thought, ये भी वैसे ही बड़ा होके मुझे मारेगा शायद. This baby is going to grow up and it's probably going to be violent. And for me, that was very important, to raise this child, not only to be a feminist, and what does that feminism mean, and what does it mean to all the men and young boys that I see there in the audience, is that you should have the right to a full spectrum of human emotion. You have the right to cry, as you said too. You have the right to cry, you have the right to be wrong and to ask for an apology. एक ये हमने अपने बेटों को नहीं सिखाया है कि learn how to say sorry. Learn how to say sorry, and that is what, that makes you a feminist, because you are fallible. You will make mistakes. Okay, learn how to follow, not just to lead. So these are the things that were very important for me to write. And one comment I want to make is that India has such a strong literary tradition, and I write novels as well. My new novel is out, but it was very important for me to write a memoir, and to write How to Raise a Feminist Son as a memoir. And I kept being told by, literary people that, novels, you can get awards, memoir is not a very respectable thing. It's all for women, as if that's not important. Women write memoirs. It's navel-gazing. In the US, they say that. But we in India especially, there are so many stories that women have to tell. Women are living incredible lives. And if you don't tell those stories, that livelihood is not recorded. It's not chronicled. And that there's an honesty to saying, this is what I believe, this is what I have agency over, these are the decisions I made. So for me, writing that was about self-actualization, because I was not a self-sacrificing mother, I was a self-actualizing woman. And my son just had to come along with that, right? And teaching him to do that was my expression, my literature, and it's living with that that has been important. One last comment I want to make is about the variety of women that we write as characters, whether we're writing memoir, whether we're writing about women characters in our lives, or we're writing literary characters. It's very important to write flawed women characters, because we're constantly, which is important, right? We have to write these women who are fighting and are, either victims, we don't like to do that, or survivors, or are struggling and have turned out to be incredible and great. For me, the latest novel, I've written it entirely from the point of view of a terrible white male English professor. I'm not any of those things, in the US, and he's obsessed with this woman who's a hijabi Pakistani law professor, and how he keeps minimizing her, in his view, as a sexualized object, right? But then we learn a very complicated truth about her. She's not the good girl who's worthy of being rescued. Because see, in the West, there's this perception of, the Afghan woman has to be rescued. These women, Muslim women have to be rescued from their own men. Brown women have to be rescued from brown men and have to be, given freedom by America. That was very important for me to turn those tropes around. And so giving her the agency to be a flawed and almost dangerous woman, and a dislikable woman, an unlikable woman, was very important, because we don't have to be likable, we don't have to be leading excellent, beautiful, flawless lives in order to be worthy of rescue, in order to be invited back to India by your family, or be garlanded. I was glad to get the marigold garland at the airport. It brought tears to my eyes, because I don't get that treatment for the choices that I've made in life, right? So it's very important to do that, and for that we have to write about these complex, flawed women, flawed lives, lives of agency, desire, and chaos. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that very beautiful conclusion to a session that could well have been called Many Feminisms here, because all of you represented so many deep and important points of view and conveyed them so beautifully. Now I want to open up for exactly 3 questions. One, you, एक ही रो में 3. नहीं. Okay, first the lady. Can somebody have a mic? Can we have a mic, please? First the lady. 3 questions and no comments. Just questions, and if you want to, we don't have time for comments. Otherwise, you would have been on the panel, huh? No, if it's a comment, then later.
Okay, then.
Because
I'll ask.
listen, we are short of time.
Okay, thanks to all the speakers. I mean,
We only have tea.
and especially Madam Jha is, carrying on with the work that, Spivak and Chandra Talpade Mohanty had begun, saying no to the rescue. Just one thing that I wanted to say to Madam Shenoy, with all due respect. Throughout your talk, it was brilliant, but at one point you said one of my cousins, she was a working woman. So whenever I hear that word, I mean, I would have been happier had you said she has a job. Because we don't have, terms like, you don't talk of a career man or a working man, do you? So I would have preferred if you simply said that my cousin has a job.
It was not my cousin.
No.
It was not my cousin. It was the character in the book.
Okay.
And secondly, this
So-
book set in the 80s. So
Right.
in the 80s, I have to be true to that era.
Okay.
The 80s, we never said job. It was working woman always in the 80s and
yes,
things
but
like that. Yeah.
isn't it, is, yeah.
Your views. You write a book about it, about how you got so offended by this.
So, Namita,
after
can-
that, you.
No,
Ke paas
me,
mic.
na, mere paas mic hai, so I can hold it. All right. I just want to ask one central question, that we are talking so much about the, necessarily writing and so many women. I'm happy that Mrinalini mentioned those authors, and one of those authors is mine. The point is that I'm also talking about the right to read. The right to read was not an easily given right to women. It had to be earned and fought for, and it's as equally important as the right to vote. And therefore, also, there has to be access to literature. So therefore, as publishers, we need to try and publish those types of books which women can access. And I'm talking about Aldine paperbacks in the late 15th century.
Important.
In
but
very
so
important,
what-
that's all.
so- very-
Yeah, that's all.
So,
I
no,
finished my question.
okay. Can you give the very important point? And I'm glad all strengths to you and other publishers who do that. Yeah, please.
Yeah, the question is, I mean, you don't need to answer, but the question still remains that despite so much of awakening, whether literary or social, and especially in this country, how is it that the mindset doesn't go away? I mean, we hear about horrendous crimes.
that is a
still.
question-
No, I'll just follow it up with just one small statement.
take your time.
I don't know, as Oscar Wilde said, most of literature is unread and most of journalism is unreadable. So the fact is that, is it that literature is itself become a little cocoon? I would actually agree with, Preeti Shenoy, because the kind of horrendous stories you hear about female feticide in this country, I mean, what kind of a society? You, in fact, began with Swami Atma Pragyanananda. We have had philosophers
So
like
what-
Gargi and
so
Maitri. So
all that
where
you
are
said
we?
is good.
Where are we heading?
Can you give what's the question?
The question is that despite that awakening,
Okay.
why is it that the mindset in this country, or across the world even, doesn't change?
I think that is a very, very important question. And I think it's a wonderful way to conclude this session.
I'm actually encouraging my daughter not to marry.
Well,
I
don't-
mean, no,
that's-
I'm just saying that because I am actually encouraging her
So
not
well,
to.
that's your personal choice.
No, that's
but
okay.
excuse me. Now I'm here. Thank you for asking that question, because as a moderator, I find it's a very good way for all 4 people to sum up. If I ask each of them one by one, why is the mindset not changing? Then
That's a very good question, sir. I think now it's even worse, mainly because men are more insecure. See, violence stems from a sense of insecurity in yourself. So while women are progressing in all fronts, as everybody is saying, women have come a long way. I agree. We have come a long way. We are all sitting here and talking, no? So we have come a long way. But that makes men more insecure. The more insecure you feel, the more prone to being violent. That's the reason we have always been, you start from Sita to Manipur, it's women's body which is always the target for any violence or any fight, any insecurity, any fear. Men are equally insecure, equally fearful right now, and they take it out on women. So I don't see how the mindset changes unless we all write books like her, how to make your son a feminist, which of course my son is a feminist, thankfully. So that is something that has to be ingrained from the beginning. You can't change so many people are listening to us right now. I don't expect any of them to change overnight into feminists. It had to start from scratch, from the beginning. So that is how we all had to breed feminist voice. Only then we can do that. So this insecurity and fear of men is causing a worse situation than before.
Thank you. Thank you. I think yours was a rhetorical question, but still, I will. Yeah, we are taking it as an actual question. And I would say that the best way to bring about change in society would be if the mothers are not co-opted into the patriarchal mindset and the mothers become feminist, raise their sons as feminists in the sense, respect for women. And if all mothers take it upon themselves to raise their sons to respect women, societal change will occur.
Very difficult.
No, it's not difficult. It is when the women themselves are co-opted into the patriarchy.
In this country, very difficult.
Listen, now, this is not your question. No,
Sorry.
Yes, I think that's my point.
I think that's a very important point. Your question has raised a lot of answers. That's why we are this thing. And I think the next book, either you write or one of us writes, is how to raise a feminist mother. So.
Yes. So, you know, in choosing the title of the book, right, How to Raise a Feminist Son, there's, even in the US and here, it does, you know, some people feel, what do you mean by feminist? You mean feminine? And I said, that's fine if he's feminine too. I mean, it doesn't have to be, you know, we have to embrace all genders. I think to answer your question, one of the reasons or the main reason why things haven't changed is because we are not expecting men to see the benefit of feminism or to see the benefit of living a feminist life, right? It's been shown, research has shown that men who embrace a feminist way of living actually live longer, healthier lives because they are able to express, they're not bottling up their emotions, they're not, you know, they don't have to resort to alcoholism or violence, they don't have to turn outward, they can turn inward, they can call their friends and cry, they can talk about their emotional lives. So, and they have a healthier relationship within their families. They don't get sidelined or alienated from their families. So once we see that, we see the benefit of this kind of progressive way of living, men will come around. And then what happens when men come around, I'll just finish that, is that the systemic change happens because we've been focused so much on empowering women. That's really important. But you know what? Women have been empowered for generations. I've seen powerful and powerful and powerful women. What has not happened is that men haven't learned to get out of our way. Once you learn to get out of our way, to pass the mic, to give the right positions and everything, and then women or people of all genders don't get co-opted, don't become enablers of patriarchy, that will bring about change.
A clap for that. And now I'm asking Preeti, but before that, okay, I'll tell you later.
No, I think there are three things at play here. One is education, second is exposure, third is the courage. So where are these three things going to come from? That's an important question to ask. Because even today, I know from my Instagram, I interact with a lot of young people. I write for young people. So many young girls write to me saying, our parents are putting pressure on us to get married. And one of the points I wrote in that letter to my daughter is that don't even bother about marriage. You know, whether you happen, doesn't matter. And I think that's the mindset change which has to come. Because where is the courage going to come from? From literature, from exposure, from strong support systems. I think that's very important. And then when a mother has these views, she'll raise kids. I have a son and a daughter, raise them both the same. So I think that's very important. Empower your daughters, teach them driving, teach them all the skills to survive in this world. Same for your sons.
So on that note, big clap. And I just want to say that I've always felt old-fashioned Ardhanareshwar way, there's a man within every woman, there's a woman within every man. So let us respect, we women, and in Jaipur, we resist manels where they're only men, but this is a panel or whatever it is. But let us all respect the man within, the woman within, and we'll be fine. Okay, thank you.
थैंक यू सो मच, बहुत बहुत थैंक्स नमिता गोखले जी का, डॉक्टर सी मृणालिनी जी, लीना जी, प्रीति शिनॉय, सोनोरा झा, आपका बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया। सिर्फ 2-3 मिनट के लिए आपकी प्रेजेंस और चाहिए, रिक्वेस्ट करूंगा आप सभी से, क्योंकि थैंक यू सो मच, इट वाज वेरी वंडरफुल सेशन, और तमाम डिफरेंट आयाम, उसके डायमेंशंस, पर्सनल पर्सपेक्टिव से लेकर सोशल और लिटरेरी पर्सपेक्टिव्स तक निकल कर आए। बहुत बहुत आभार। एक बुक है जिसका लोकार्पण होना है, तो जस्ट इन फ्यू सेकेंड्स, या प्लीज़ टेक योर सीट्स। थैंक यू नमिता जी, साहित्य अकादमी की ओर से। हाँ अच्छा, 1 मिनट आ जाएं नमिता जी, प्लीज़ स्टे एट दिस स्टेज। नमिता जी, मृणालिनी जी एंड लीना जी, प्लीज़ कम ऑन स्टेज। आप भी आएँ प्लीज़, हाँ प्लीज़ कम। आप सबकी प्रेजेंस में ही ये होगा, अच्छा लगेगा। प्रीति शिनॉय, प्लीज़ कम ऑन स्टेज। एक बुक है सुरेश ऋतुपर्णा जी की, हिरोशिमा की याद और अन्य कविताएं, बहुत बहुत खूबसूरत बुक है। वनिता जी ने उसका अनुवाद किया है। आप प्लीज़ वनिता जी आइए, सुरेश जी आइए प्लीज़। और तो सुरेश जी ने बहुत एक अच्छे संकलन कविता का जो उनका है लिखा, जिन्होंने हिरोशिमा की याद और अन्य कविताएं, उसका पंजाबी में वनीता जी ने अनुवाद किया, उसका लोकार्पण होना है। माधव कौशिक जी और आप भी, डॉक्टर के श्रीनिवास राव जी आइए प्लीज़। माधव कौशिक जी हमारे साहित्य अकादमी के अध्यक्ष, डॉक्टर के श्रीनिवास राव जी सचिव। तो ये पुस्तक का लोकार्पण जो है वो आपकी ही उपस्थिति में, प्रेजेंस में हो, बड़ा अच्छा लग रहा है। तो इसलिए आप सिर्फ 2-3 मिनट के लिए और रुक जाएं। जी जी, किताब भी अब प्लीज।
मानवता के इतिहास में आज का दिन ऐसा दिन है जो कोई नहीं भूल सकता। 6 अगस्त 1945 को पहला एटम बॉम्ब चला था हिरोशिमा पर, और उसकी याद को लोग भूल जाते हैं। जब मैं जापान में पढ़ाता था, मैंने अपनी क्लास में कहा कि आज मैं हिरोशिमा पर एक पाठ बनाऊंगा, तो मेरा जापानी स्टूडेंट खड़ा हुआ और उसने कहा कि सर, हम हिरोशिमा को याद नहीं रखना चाहते, हम हिरोशिमा पे बात नहीं करेंगे। मैं परेशान हो गया, ये कैसे लोग हैं, इतना नुकसान उठाने के बाद 2 लाख लोग 1 सेकंड के अंदर भाप बन करके उड़ गए थे। उन लोगों के बीच में ये लोग कहते हैं उसे याद नहीं रखना चाहते हैं। मैं इतना बेचैन हुआ और तब मैंने एक कविता लिखी। वो कविता नहीं सुनाऊंगा, सिर्फ 3 लाइन सुनाऊंगा जो तत्काल मेरे मन में आई थी। बचाए रखना ज़रूरी है हिरोशिमा की याद, ये याद ही रोकेगी और हिरोशिमा होने से। अगर ये याद न हो तो आज न जाने कितने हिरोशिमा हो चुके होते। आप ध्यान रखिए इस बात को। अगर हमको एटम बॉम्ब की त्रासदी से बचना है पूरी दुनिया को, तो हिरोशिमा को याद बनाए रखिए। तो ये किताब जब मेरी आई तो तत्काल इसका जापानी में अनुवाद किया, और उसके बाद में इसको अंग्रेजी में अनुवाद किया गया, कोंकणी और कई भाषाओं में हुआ। आज मेरा सौभाग्य है कि वनीता जी साथ हैं, इन्होंने इसको पंजाबी में किया है, और ये किताब अभी 2-3 दिन पहले ही छप कर आई थी। तो हमने सोचा आप लोगों की उपस्थिति में हम इस पुस्तक का विमोचन करें। आप सबकी उपस्थिति हमको गौरव देने वाली है। मैं ठीक माधव जी से कहूँगा कि वो इसको
बहुत बहुत शुभकामनाएं ट्रांसलेटर को भी, लेखक को भी और आप सभी को भी धन्यवाद।
आप सबको जान के प्रसन्नता होगी कि साहित्य अकादमी ने अणु बम की छाया में पुस्तक प्रकाशित की है, जिसमें हिरोशिमा पर लिखी हुई कविताओं को शामिल किया गया है, और वो भी सुरेश ऋतुपर्ण जी और जापान के हमारे एक अन्य रचनाकार के साथ मिलकर के वो काम हुआ था, और वो हिंदी में प्रकाशित है। वो हमारे बुक शॉप पर भी उपलब्ध है, आप उस पुस्तक को भी देख सकते हैं। धन्यवाद।
साहित्य अकादमी के बुक स्टॉल पर ज़रूर जाइएगा, और वहाँ बहुत सारी ऐसी किताबें हैं जिनका आप उपयोग करें। वी विल हैव अ ब्रेक फॉर 10 मिनट्स, क्योंकि अगला सेशन हम टाइमली शुरू कर पाएँ इसके लिए। लेकिन अभी के लिए सुरेश ऋतुपर्णा जी का बहुत बहुत उनको बधाई, वनीता जी को बधाई, आभार माधव कौशिक जी और सभी पैनलिस्ट का। द नेक्स्ट सेशन we will be starting very soon, so please be seated after 15 minutes, not more than 15 minutes. And that session is going to be a very different kind of session because it is different strokes. विविध कलेवर जो है हमारी राइटिंग्स के, उनको लेकर उस सेशन को हमने डिज़ाइन किया है, और वो बहुत ही थॉट प्रोवोकिंग, बहुत विचारोत्तेजक एक सेशन होगा आपके सामने। साहित्य अकादमी ने आज नई सारे जो चिंतन हैं अलग अलग साहित्य में, जो पारंपरिक चिंतन से, परंपरा से हटकर हैं, ऐसी बहुत सारी चीज़ों को इस उन्मेष के अंतर्गत इस बार उसे मंच दिया, जगह दी, उन विचारों को आपके सामने रखे जाने का एक माध्यम बनाया। तो इसलिए आप सब उसका हिस्सा ज़रूर बने। आप प्लीज़ 15 मिनट के भीतर आप वापस आकर अपनी जगह ले लें, अगले सेशन की शोभा भी बढ़ाएं। थैंक यू सो मच। अभी के लिए बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद आपका।